about me, I was a big law lawyer for about 7 years. And for the last 11 years, I've been on what we call the business side of the law, 5 of those in legal operations at the aforementioned Facebook/Meta and at Coinbase. Have worked a ton with law firms in my non-law firm days as well. So I'm excited to dig into some of these issues around innovation. And overall, just excited to hear a little bit about what law firms are doing. I will also just totally own, before we get started, that I'm a huge skeptic around all of this for law firms for some very specific reasons that we'll delve into. So my hope, Joe, is that you're alleviating some of those concerns through the course of this conversation.
We'll do our best.
But please, let's hear a little bit about your background.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you. My name is Joe Green. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Gunderson Dettmer. I also spent 7 years in the salt mines in big law firms, first at Simpson Thacher, and then as a corporate lawyer working with startups, venture-backed startups and VCs at Gunderson Dettmer. And then I did a bit of a sojourn for 4.5 years into the legal tech space. I went to work at Practical Law at Thomson Reuters, mostly developing content, teaching startup lawyers how to be startup lawyers. But I pretty quickly fell into the world of legal technology and the business of law, the future of the legal industry, writing about that, speaking about that, building products. And that ultimately led me back to Gunderson to build out an innovation function in 2020.
So tell us a little about what does the innovation function in Gunderson entail?
Well, when I got back, it was me and a director of knowledge management who had just transitioned about a year before from practice, and one person in IT. And nobody had much of an idea of what exactly we were going to be doing. But Gunderson, for many years, was a very small, scrappy firm. Brian was there, Brian Chase was there in the bad old days. And it was a bit of a startup itself, and going through some scaling. And so we were fortunate in that we didn't have a ton of tech debt. We didn't have a ton of scar tissue from investments and legacy to be around and continue to be strong, for their careers. So that gave us a lot of tailwinds. We grew from a team of 3 to 30 now. We did that in about 2 years. So a very startup-like experience within Gunderson, building out this function, which really the mandate, the mission was to focus on how do we do what we do better? How do we do it differently? How do we do it, at scale? And how do we prepare for the changes that we already can see are coming in our industry?
I'd love to hear a little bit about the why behind this. I think when most of us think of law firms, we think of effort, we think of revenue, we think of long hours. We think of a lot of repeatable work. So there's, at least to some extent, an argument that can be made that you're cutting off revenue streams by innovation and with technology. So tell us a little bit about the mindset and maybe the internal conversation at Gunderson that got you really excited about why they wanted to innovate and the role that you were going to play in it.
Yeah, so the conversation at the beginning of 2020 was a little different than maybe the conversation would be today, just given the macro environment. I came into a firm that was going gangbusters, growing extraordinarily fast. Tech was the place to be, doing VC rounds. You were all there, right? I mean, it was a pretty wild time, 2021, 2022. If we're thinking about, hey, we're going to be cannibalizing some of our hours for really low value tasks and kind of streamlining things, that's not really a concern in a world where you have, so much excess demand and where people, frankly, are burning out, from the pace of the practice. So I think incentives are very much aligned there. And now we've moved into a different world. I think that the reality is that, the cost of legal services in general are too high. There's too much work that's bundled into it that's not valuable to our clients. And so by taking away more of that, it allows us to unlock what I believe is a whole bunch of latent demand of things that you would prefer not to do, but are not going to send to us at the price that it would cost for an outside law firm to do that, and allow us to service a whole slew of unmet demand, from entrepreneurs who aren't hiring lawyers. And, if we had, better processes, better, using technology to be able to handle more work at scale, and, to deliver, the same quality service that our clients expect. I actually think that there's still a very strong business model in that world.
Do you find that to be a unique mindset at Gunderson, or is it something you think will eventually permeate through, let's just say, the AmLaw 100, the AmLaw 150? We can leave kind of the smaller firms aside for the time being, but I don't think you're hearing about this kind of innovation out of a lot of firms. So is it something unique to Gunderson? And if so, why is that? And if not, like, why are we not hearing about this from more firms, as many of us who are on the buy side of the equation for legal services?
Yeah, I mean, Gunderson is definitely a strange bird. It was founded in 1995. It's, relatively young firm. The founders are just sort of still in transition. Many of them are still practicing, full bore. But they had a vision for what they were trying to build, and that was a much more focused firm. I mean, we have over 400 lawyers, but effectively it's a boutique in a lot of ways compared to our kind of main competitors who are true kind of full service law firms. We're not trying to be a full service law firm. We don't have a single litigator. We try to be best in breed in what we do, and I think that is unique among firms of our size, and certainly in our space. And so I think that our partners already have a different mindset around what it is that we're trying to do, and to be the very best at what we do in the space that we have, to really own that space. I know that there are a lot of people in roles like mine at other law firms that are fighting the good fight, and think very similarly about where the industry is headed. I think many of the kind of old line firms have a long way to go, and most likely will have to be dragged there by you all, kicking and screaming before they see the light.
Yeah, I think buyers have a significant level of leverage and power with respect to shaping how legal services are delivered. Talk a little bit about any pushback, irrespective of kind of, let's say, the new mindset with which the firm was started 30 years ago. Talk a little bit about the mindset, because it's not like these were brand new lawyers on day one that started the firm. They still came from other law firms. They had the same training, the same kind of pedigree for the most part. They were used to thinking about doing work and actually doing work in a particular fashion. Whereas now there's a big change management associated with that in whatever areas, and we'll talk about specific use cases in a minute, but in whatever areas you may be leveraging technology and innovation. But talk a little bit about the pushback that you may have received, if any. If you didn't, please share those secrets with us as well. And really how you navigated or are still navigating those conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting. The good news is, at least, with respect to Gunderson, the pushback is not conceptual. I would have trouble thinking of a conversation that I've had where, I'm talking with a partner or even our associates, if our paralegals, who kind of rejects the premise that, there may be better ways that we can do things or faster ways that we can do things. It's a firm that works with tech startups and VCs, right? I mean, everybody's self-selected to come work in this industry because they think that technology, and new ways of doing things is exciting. And so that's a great place to be trying to do innovation. But man, is it still a slog, because people are people. And lawyers are lawyers. And, it's very challenging to get people, particularly people who are incredibly busy, under a lot of pressure, to just take a chance on doing something different when they have a solution that they're comfortable with, that they know works. It's very challenging. And for an example, we've adopted technology that takes away the fabulous task that I did as a junior associate at Simpson, where I would, print out all of the contracts for a deal and take all the signature pages and collate them and scan them and send them out, and or put them in file folders for people to come sign in person. We have technology that does that beautifully, wonderfully now, but is M&A closing a great time to experiment on this new solution? Does that paralegal or first year associate want to be the one to say, sorry, new tool, gonna be a couple days before we close this deal? No, right? So we try to get people to use it with formations, with lower stakes tasks, right? It's all about managing change. And it's iterative, and sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't. But I rarely, like I said, encounter people who are, opposed for the sake of being opposed, or who fundamentally think this is a bad idea.
Let's talk, since you raised one specific use case, let's talk about some of the use cases internally at Gunderson, and maybe we should bifurcate it into two areas, although I think they're very related. One would be a completely internally facing set of use cases. And one, I think particularly for the audience, that you either are thinking about or actually leveraging for the benefit of the client. And that can be a better output, that can be a more accurate output, it can be lower cost, any of the above. We'd love to hear about kind of those kind of use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can start with the internal one first. This is an AI conference, so I can share a little bit about what we've been doing in the AI space. We started using AI tools well before ChatGPT was announced. We were using tools in diligence. These were quite old technology, machine learning classifiers, but still quite valuable in doing due diligence for venture financings and mergers. And then more recently, but still a year or two before ChatGPT was released, we started using large language model powered tools to structure information from transaction documents, to extract data and then be able to do analytics on that data. So we had already seen the power of what large language models could do, and started trying our hand at prompt engineering and seeing where it was really successful, where it still, struggled. We saw that it was a mixed bag, but we also saw that it was incredibly powerful. And boy, was it more pleasant than having to find a whole bunch of examples of a particular clause and hand label them so that a classifier could understand what might else, look like that. And by the way, just because it finds some language that looks like that, that's not the answer, right? Now you have to still tell what the answer is. These large language models were actually able to structure the data saying, yes, that is this kind of provision, or no, it's not, similar to what we saw today with Spot Draft. And so we had started using that. ChatGPT came on the scene. We struggled with the same questions that you all, I'm sure, have struggled with. Is, should we be banning this? Our malpractice insurer sent out a blog post saying ChatGPT is not ready for prime time, and hot off the presses came all of the memos from the risk department saying this thing is completely banned. We ended up having a meeting of the minds, very similar to what was discussed earlier. We got our GC's office, we got our technology folks together, our managing partner. We talked about it in person, actually, at our partner meeting, and came up with what we thought were practical guidelines for how people could use ChatGPT, the public version, safely. But at the same time, we learned that we could get access to Azure OpenAI through Microsoft on terms that we were comfortable. The information that we provided to the large language model, we were not going to be used to train it. We're not going to leak out of it. And so we ended up building an application. We call it ChatGD. We launched it in August to our entire firm. It has two main functions. One, you chat directly with the large language model. One of the GPT models, could be any of the other models too. We actually built it so it can be model agnostic. And it's a very ChatGPT-like experience, except that you can use confidential information and we're comfortable. The additional piece that we did, we talked about RAG a little bit earlier, not the red, amber, green, but retrieval augmented generation allows our attorneys to upload a document, a collection of documents, and then use retrieval augmented generation to effectively chat with the documents, to feed context from those documents along with their prompt into the model and get an output, which reduces hallucinations, provides much more interesting and useful results in many cases. And that's something that was not available with ChatGPT. The alternative was going to one of the first movers, Case Text, Harvey, one of these companies out there that was charging an arm and a leg because they were really first out of the gate. And so we decided to build something instead. Give ourselves an opportunity to get our hands dirty with the technology, understand it better. Lots of our lawyers are advising many folks like you on how to incorporate this technology into products, what kind of policies you should have, all the things that we've been discussing today. So now we have some technical expertise as well in-house to be able to kind of inform those discussions. It's not theoretical. We've actually done it, and it's been really successful so far. Third of the firm, I would say, is using it with very little work on kind of doing engagement. We had 60% of the firm show up to one of 3 real-time trainings, which is kind of unheard of at a law firm. You get that many people to show up. So there's tremendous amount of interest, and we are kind of capturing a whole bunch of use cases, both on the business side and in the delivery of legal services that are really interesting and valuable so far.
You talked about success and certainly adoption or attendance at trainings. It's kind of one metric that you're leveraging to kind of evaluate that. What about on the client side? How is this showing up in success stories or analytics or any KPIs that you're measuring? whether it's deals or transactions or things of that nature. Talk a little bit about the client side of the equation.
Yeah, sure. So with ChatGD, I'd say it's still very early days in terms of, concretely how that's impacting our service delivery. We did not pitch this tool as this is how you do X, Y, or Z now. This is now how you practice law. Not at all. This tool was pitched to be a learning tool. How can you learn what these models do, what they do well, what they don't do well, and start moving up the learning curve of how to get the most out of these tools, because they're going to become ubiquitous. They're going to be in your Word and your Outlook and all of the other tools that you use. So how can we get better at that more quickly? And how can we start identifying use cases that may be the kinds of things that we can productionize? So I don't have great, kind of metrics on, how this is moving the needle from a client perspective yet. I'm confident that we will have those, but it's still pretty early days. But AI is but one of the many things that we do to try to, improve the way that we do things. We use, technologies that may not be as hot at the moment, but things like document automation. And those tools can be incredibly powerful and also really scale. For example, for years, we would give a brand newly formed startup a suite of, forms in Word and say, off you go. Here's an offer letter, a PIA, an NDA, a consulting agreement, advisor agreement. Good luck. And nowadays, 50 states, different countries, those laws are changing constantly. Non-competes, you name it, right? So the second we would give a Word form out, it would probably be no longer good law. And we're giving these out, by the way, to founders, not companies that have you all who can tell them that this is not working anymore. And so we built something using document automation software, initially internally, as a way of being able to provide PIAs that work in X state that's not where the company is based. But as the pandemic happened and everybody moved all over the place and every company became remote and distributed, we ended up basically creating that. We call it our contract generator. And we're able to provide it to our clients. We have over 1,000 companies that are using this every day, that have that whole suite of forms. The base forms, we maintain those. We make sure that they're 50 state compliant, and keep up to date with all of the changes in the law. The client is able to generate the documents, but they're actually tailored to the client. So it has their name in it already. You're not typing your name in every time. It has what choices you've made about, hey, am I have a bunch of people in California and a bunch of people everywhere else. Am I subjecting them all to or am I subjecting everyone outside of California to non-competes or not, right? All of those kinds of choices that you may make at a form level, those are baked in for each individual company and tailored for each individual company. So that's an example. Gathering
any specific client feedback that's been helpful as you iterate through this?
Yes, people really like that one. Yeah. It's something that, I think for many of the founders, maybe they didn't really know what they were missing, but certainly for companies that have GCs that are trying to stay on top of this and small legal departments, it's kind of a game changer.
Have you found any particular hooks internally that have helped? Somebody in the audience earlier shared certainly, just reducing the manual labor of reviewing contracts as a particular hook. JP earlier talked about the potential of having a deposition summary or a real-time objection, which I'm not there yet, obviously. But I love that. But having something like that, is there a particular set of hooks or a hook that you have found particularly useful internally as you've messaged your way through this at Gunderson?
For which piece of it?
And for any of the pieces around innovation, whether it's automation or new tooling or anything like that.
Yeah. Social proof is incredibly helpful. Once you get a couple of people who use it and like it, sharing that and asking them to share it with their colleagues, for internal innovations makes a huge difference. Sharing, it's very similar to selling products, right? Sharing client testimonials, with other clients, saying, hey, other clients are finding this useful. That's always helpful. I think also internally, people underestimate how powerful just using technology systems in your daily work can be, and showing them that, hey, because we form all of our companies using document automation software, we can now tell you what percentage of the time people are choosing this term versus this term. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's like this, totally unintended benefit that I wasn't even thinking about. But by virtue of using this and not doing it the old way, it unlocks a whole world of opportunities of understanding better how people are using the tool and what we're seeing in the marketplace. So I think those are the kinds of things that create this kind of feedback loop that make people find the tool more valuable.
Yeah. Any conversations around the economics of this? Certainly more effort equals more revenue, but there's a potential here to increase margins or increase overall volumes, things that maybe law firms haven't had to grapple with more directly in the past because they were able to grow their businesses so incredibly well over the last 150 years. But any conversations around that you found particularly useful or helpful in this endeavor?
Yeah, I think that and maybe this is a leap of faith, but if we're able to move all of our people up the value chain to doing higher value work, creates more impact, doing more of the things that, again, clients actually want people to be doing. My sense is that the economics will eventually work themselves out. Will there be changes to the models? I think undoubtedly, changes to the business model. But right now, our focus is really, how do we do everything that we're doing better, more effectively, more efficiently, and how do we take all of our people and have them doing whatever is their highest and best use? The amount of for anyone who's worked in this space, and I'm sure this is the same for you, the amount of things that you end up spending a lot of your day doing, you wonder, law school, college, why you woke up in the morning to do any of these things. It's drudgery. Nobody wants to do drudgery. So I think that's really, and there's so much low-hanging fruit in that space that removing pain is kind of our main focus.
I think you can call it an orchard or fields of low-hanging fruit that are there to
I trip over it everywhere I go.
Somebody asked or raised a point or a question earlier, like when I think is really pertinent right now. So given the changes or the leveraging of technology or innovation inside the law firm world, and I still think law firms are one of the best places to get trained to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
What do you do for those first 3 years? Do you what's your perspective? Like, do you change the way that you now train lawyers?
Yeah.
Because law schools don't do a good job of teaching anyone really anything except how to read case law. So you have to learn how to do once you get to your place of employment, and law firms, I think are some of the best at doing that. But now, does that change? Is there a fundamental shift in that thought process?
I think drastically. I mean, I've dabbled as an academic and spent some time, in and out of law schools, and they certainly have a role to play and can be doing a much better job, sending people who have some more practical skills, or at least kind of wherewithal and awareness about what they're walking into in this industry. But the law firms, this is an area that I felt was already breaking down when I started practicing. The idea that this was a real kind of apprenticeship profession where you were just going to, spend a lot of time with senior practitioners and just, kind of learn through osmosis and, brute force repetition. I got the brute force repetition for sure. The apprenticeship piece, when people are very busy, I think that really was already kind of falling by the wayside. Factor in hybrid workplaces and, kind of remote workers and all of that, and it just becomes, even more difficult. I think that there are solutions to this, but they require work and intentionality and investment. I think that, some combination of true shadowing, for example, we've automated a lot of our formation process, and there have been partners who have said, well, how's a first year going to learn how to do a formation if they don't, put the name and, type. And I said, they need to be on the call where you talk with the founder about what matters, because that's what we ultimately want them doing. And the rest of it, you can teach them in simulations, experiential learning. In fact, they'll get it a lot faster if you had really good training that's not someone just standing up there reading off of PowerPoint slides because they didn't put any time into preparing, but actual capsules where you're making sure that when they leave that, they know how to do something. And how do you know? Because you've tested them to see, right? There's this whole world of pedagogy that's, completely absent in the way that law firms train junior lawyers, because it takes work and it's hard. And so I think that a real emphasis and focus on those types of things, real kind of back to the apprenticeship model and shadowing and learning what senior lawyers do, and then, kind of experiential learning are going to be keys. And I think also, and this is true today, not everybody's going to be a partner at a law firm. Not everybody has to be. There are going to be a whole bunch of other people who become really good at using the technology tools, and that's their superpower. They're super efficient, super productive at using these tools. And so, again, it's maybe more division of labor, but I think the training needs a bit of a page one rewrite. But this also been to other conferences where there's a lot of talk of we don't pay for first years, now we don't pay for second years. It's like, well, where do you think third years come from? Right? And so I mean, to some degree, this is something that we as a whole industry need to figure out better solutions for.
I used to hear a metric in my practicing days about you're pretty much committing malpractice in the first 3 years of practicing law because you really don't know how to do anything. I wonder if that, I don't know how true that is or was, but I wonder if this changes any of that. One of the common themes in all the conversations today has been one around trust. What is your approach to building trust internally at Gunderson around innovation? And as a corollary to that, where the innovation that you're advocating for relies on an output that's non-human, how do you help build trust with the lawyers at Gunderson with that output?
Yeah, so I would say in general, it helps a lot that I've walked more than a mile in the shoes of everyone in the firm in terms of, having been in the trenches and been doing the work. I know how to talk about what they're doing. I also, I fundamentally know who my customer is because I was the customer. Feel in my bones the pains that they're feeling, and still remember it well. So I think that gives a lot of credibility, but that can be squandered, right? I mean, I think one of the hardest things that I've found about driving an innovation function and trying to fundamentally change the way people do things is that in order to truly innovate, there's a lot of things that have to happen that are not interesting. It's a lot of infrastructure building and things that people don't understand. Why am I being asked to do this? And so what I found to be most successful is in really pitching a vision of what your life could be, how much better your life could be, and then being able to tie all of the little things that we're going to ask you to do to how this helps support that and drive that kind of fundamental vision. And if you can get people bought into that vision, then they're more inclined, not perfectly inclined, but they're more inclined to work with you on a whole host of things. Yeah. And when it comes to the technology, the reality is that there are very few things that we're doing, including with generative AI, that at this point we are comfortable with them being headless. Right? They all have a human in the loop, and in many cases, it's not just for the human to check, but the human still has a lot of value to add from that point. So it's a starting point. It gets you from A to C, not A to Z. And that's really something that we've really tried to drill into people's heads, including from a risk perspective. One of our cardinal rules around using ChatGPT or ChatGD is you are the first human being to look at this. You got it from a machine that doesn't actually know anything. It's not reasoning. It sometimes seems like it is, but it's not. You are responsible for only asking it things that you can actually verify the accuracy and completeness of. You're the one in the driver's seat. You're the one with the legal license. And, we really try to impress them.
Well, there's been plenty out in the space, whether you want to call it science fiction or concerns around this, that it will start reasoning. It really hit home for me, actually. I follow Neil Katyal, who's a Supreme Court lawyer, on Twitter. He posts often. And this is probably 3 or 4 months ago, but this is actually during the time when ChatGPT literally was everywhere in every headline, in every conversation, so maybe 6 months ago. And he went to ChatGPT and he asked it to write a blog post on a SCOTUS issue. I can't remember if it was on a particular justice or an issue that was before the court, but in his voice. Now he's all over the internet, in opinions, in articles, and he posted the output on Twitter and he said it was scarily like him. Yep. Now, there's a lot of language that model was able to feed on for Neil's voice to be able to articulate that. But I'm sure that there are other concerns like that have come up at Gunderson. Can you share a little bit about? I was gonna add the adjective reasonable concerns that have arisen, but maybe we'll just go with concerns that have arisen as a course of this.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know how concerning that is, right? I mean, the fact that it's scary good at certain things, in my mind is largely a great thing. Now, as with any tool, it could be terribly misused. I mean, somebody could be writing a bunch of things in Neil's voice saying terrible things. And, that's a problem that we sort of have. Either way, this potentially accelerates it. Internally, the types of concerns, I think that, the types of concerns that we've had, certainly there are people who are filled with existential dread about their own personal future and livelihood, when seeing what this technology is capable of. But almost at the exact same time, they're also deeply disappointed by how it doesn't replace them. They'll ask it questions and be like, "This is terrible. Why would it tell me this? Well, I thought I could do this." And so a lot of what we've done has been educating people about the technology, but then also about what it's reasonable to expect it to do at this point and what it's not. I will say, every time that I go back to it, it does something that it didn't do before. Where I ask it a similar question and I'm like, wow, that's getting really good. In fact, in those trainings that we put together, I was looking for examples of when it would do things that were terrible, just to let people know, hey, if you try this, you're probably going to get terrible results. I got it to hallucinate like crazy. I asked it to write a bio of Bob the Hammer Gunderson, legendary Silicon Valley lawyer, and why he got the nickname the Hammer. That was not his nickname. And it gave a great bio of someone who was a patent litigator and won a big case and was called the Hammer because of his courtroom tactics. Bob Gunderson never litigated a case his entire life. So that was a fun example. But then I also asked it, I had been telling people like, look, it's not good at math. You can't just ask it statistical questions, assuming that it has access to a structured data set of everything in the universe and that I can manipulate that data and then provide you with an accurate answer. It's a language model. It wants to give you whatever language it seems like you want. We talked about this a little earlier. And so I tried to give it some examples and I said, let me do some venture math examples. Somebody's going to try to get this to do a pro forma model for them. And I want to show them it's going to mess that up. I had to work to trick it. I'll be honest. I mean, they were relatively basic questions. Here's the price per share, here's pre-money valuation, how many, blah, blah, blah. And it actually not only did better than some of our first years, but could also explain what it was doing. Eventually I did trick it. But the capabilities are getting to be, pretty amazing. But I think there's a lot of potential there. I think the biggest concern from my part is that people are going to trust it too much and are going to think that it's capable of things that it's not. That's why a lot of our training focused on what large language models are, how they're built, how retrieval augmented generation works. It doesn't see your whole document. It doesn't see all the documents that you've given it. It has no memory. It only looks like it has memory when you chat with it because we've given it the previous prompts each time that you chat with it. So helping people understand in as lay kind of terms as possible the technical underpinnings of this technology, I think these are smart people. Helps them understand why it would be good at something, why it would be bad at something.
So, but it does, unlike humans, learn from its mistakes and then rectifies them accordingly.
Not on our data. Not on our data. But yes.
So how do you? I mean, what's the mechanism with which you help Gunderson lawyers understand its limitations? I mean, is it written policies? Is it learning through experience? What's the mechanism for that?
Yeah, so I mean, it started with policies. It started with that kind of cardinal rule about, and this was back in we had really two cardinal rules when people were using ChatGPT, which was do not put anything confidential or remotely sensitive in it. This is a third-party tool. We have no terms with them. And by the way, you shouldn't be doing that with Google either, which I bet somebody was. And so reiterating those lessons of, this is not enterprise software that we have negotiated terms with, was just a good opportunity to remind people of that. But that other cardinal rule is, you should only ask it to do things that you can actually verify the results of. And we even, kind of came up with a, 2x2 grid of where the danger zone is. When something's high risk and you don't know that much about it, like skull and crossbones, do not use this here. If it's low risk and you know a lot about the topic, have at it. Great. It'll give you a head start. You're a subject matter expert. You'll be able to fix whatever it gets wrong because it might be 90% great, 10% whoppers. It could be 100% great, but it's missing something crucial. And so that's kind of, been our approach. And now that we actually have the tool out in the wild and people are using it, we have, in the same way you saw the thumbs up, thumbs down, right? We're able to get feedback from people about things that they think are particularly good use cases, things that they're disappointed in the results or think it was, terrible. And then we're able to create that feedback loop where we share that with everybody. continue to train. That's all part of this experiment of building muscle memory for how to use these tools.
Yeah. We have about 10 minutes left. I've just I think one more issue to quickly cover. So I encourage you to get your questions ready. Lawyers care a lot about ethics, allegedly. But in all seriousness, it's a big concern in how we practice. Out in kind of the non-legal world, there are obviously ethical and moral obligations and considerations, but it has a special place in our practice. Can you talk a little bit about any ethical considerations through the course of this? And in the course of our preparation, I shared with you an example from when I was a first-year associate at Pillsbury, and I was doing some climate change legislation research, and was asked to do a little bit of a synopsis on some regulations. I went to Google. This is 2006, and I printed some stuff out. I did some analysis, and I wrote a memo with my printouts attached. And I took them to the partner. And he took a read through the memo, and then he saw the attachments. He's like, "You're going to have to redo this." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Where did you get these citations?" And I said, "Google. This is 2006. He said, "That's not a reputable source." I don't know if things have. I think things have changed a little bit by now, yeah. But to me, that's an ethical obligation. Did I fulfill my ethical obligation as a lawyer to go to a reputable source? What are some of the navigation points for that particular issue?
Yeah, there's a. I don't know if it's a fundamental tension, but there's certainly two sides to the coin here, right? Lawyers have an ethical duty to, represent their client's best interests, to, do things the way their clients want them to do it, right? And so I think there's an element of disclosure about the way that work product is being produced. That there's kind of an argument of, the client should be aware of how their work is being produced to a certain extent. Not every client wants to know exactly how the sausage is made, and I don't think particularly cares about that. But there's a flip side of that coin, which is also that we have a duty of technological competence. And I have no doubt that the technology that we're talking about today is fundamental. It's going to be incorporated in all of the tools that we use. And so the ability to use that without hurting our clients, I think, is paramount. And I think that that's really the main. I have two colleagues who wrote an article, more or less in response to what our malpractice insurer, put out there. Basically making that case that this is part of our ethical obligations to be able to serve our clients to the best of our abilities and to use whatever tools competently and to understand those tools to provide our clients with the best service and the best outcomes. So I think it is incumbent upon all of us to not only stay abreast of these changes, but to not necessarily get out over your skis. Obviously, you don't want to be submitting made up case citations to federal courts.
By the way, that happens without AI anyway. So it's everywhere.
For my money, that's just garden variety, old fashioned malpractice. So yeah.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Let's have a few questions from the audience. Brian?
Will my costs go down?
I thought this was going to be a softball for old time's sake, Brian. Yeah, I think they will. I do think they will. I think that the fundamental problem that we have with our business model is that kind of the Cravath model of having a partner who you really want to talk to and you probably pay more for some of the best advice that they give you than what they charge you by the hour, tied together with a bunch of people doing the work that needs to get done, and somebody's got to do it, but it's at rates that when you read the bill, it makes your eyes pop out of your skull. I don't think that's a good model from a client relationship perspective. It's what we have. I think it'll take quite a while for it to change. But I think fundamentally, the costs for many of the things that you find should be able to be done faster, I think will go down. But I think you'll pay more for the things that are more valuable. And so where that shakes out, I think that's a question. And I think that makes it incumbent upon us to find ways to show value, to create value, and then to show that value and to get paid for that value.
I think the fundamental shift there is the conversation is now it's not about effort, it's about value. Yeah. And I think the Twitter Wachtell case notwithstanding, I think that's a really interesting conversation that hasn't been had enough in pricing.
Which is hard, by the way. Value pricing is hard. I mean, ask all your SaaS companies that are out there just like, what will you pay for this?
How much do you want to pay? Yeah.
Right? How much money do you have? So yeah, I mean, I think it's challenging, but I think there's a way forward through that, and I think it's a better place ultimately that the industry will end up.
Great. Any more questions from the audience? Who's ready to hire Gunderson for their next startup? Just kidding.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Do you think the demand curve is going to shift for legal services with this tech? Maybe you covered that. I came in like 5 minutes late, but yeah.
I think there's a tremendous amount of latent demand, and I also think that the pie is just going to grow. I mean, I think thinking of like litigators, the number of garbage plaintiff suits that will be able to be generated probably without any human looking at it based on this technology, will be a full employment act for defense lawyers. I think that without question, as the cost of production for so much of the work that lawyers do comes down, demand, I think, is going to go up.
Yeah.
Do you think that law firms turn to technology because their clients are telling them, hey, I want you to drive my costs down and I see all this stuff out there? Or is it that you guys are introducing it to your clients to say, hey, we have this new thing that we're going to be doing?
I think it's both. I mean, I think both of those things happen. I think there are many law firms out there that are always looking for an edge and looking to be innovative and market themselves as being innovative. And I think that, that could be a compelling argument. I think that for most companies with GCs, cost is always a part of that equation. Innovative to what end? What is this really doing for me about the things that I care most about? But in many other cases, I do think that, lawyers are responsive to their clients and what their clients want, if their clients are serious about it. I think there's often a lot of noise, and I think this is often from particularly large legal departments about wanting more efficiency, wanting to use technology, but it's just it's out there. They say it, and then I'm not sure that it actually kind of gets the results that they ultimately want. So,
I think even for the buy side, necessity drives a lot of it rather than just pure inherent desire for change. You saw a fundamental shift in law department and law firm economics after the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. GCs and CLOs just did not have the kind of carte blanche that they had before. And if you look at what I would consider like the huge spike in legal innovation, it was after that time and has continued on since then. So I think necessity will drive a lot of it, but to Joe's point, I think it is starting to come from both sides of the equation now.
Yeah, and the rise of legal ops too, right? I mean, I think that many in-house lawyers, if not most, grew up in law firms, and there's a kind of a shared community of practice around the way that things are done. Obviously, there's haggling over bills, but I think that introducing kind of more business-minded folks about thinking about the law firm as a business unit and what it will take to drive those efficiencies both internally and working with outside counsel. I think that has moved the needle with a lot of firms.